Ebony Carter wheeled her sleek luggage through Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, a place where she had once wandered wide-eyed as a child dreaming of boundless horizons. Yet today, that same airport bristled with an undercurrent of tension. Passengers bustled, staff hurried, and Ebony, dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, looked every bit the successful woman she'd worked tirelessly to become. As she approached the Millennium Airways check-in counter, her hands trembled, but not from nerves alone. She sensed something was off, something that would test her dignity, her composure, and her sense of justice. Little did anyone know the power she wielded. Ebony Carter had always loved the buzz of airports, the whir of suitcase wheels, the chorus of international accents, the promise of new destinations. These were the sounds of possibility. Growing up in rural Georgia, she'd never imagined she could one day travel the globe for business. But after building a tech startup from scratch, acquiring major contracts, and eventually selling it to a multinational conglomerate, Ebony had carved her path to becoming a millionaire. What no one outside her inner circle knew, however, was that Ebony had also become a major shareholder in Millennium Airways, a fast-rising airline known for domestic routes across the United States and a budding selection of international flights. Though her portfolio included other ventures, Millennium Airways was her secret pride. She believed in their vision of affordable luxury and hoped to help guide them to become a truly customer-centric airline. Her involvement was mostly silent, but the recent quarterly meeting had piqued her interest enough to consider stepping out from behind the curtain. Today, Ebony was traveling to New York for a high-level discussion with a few board members. She had deliberately refrained from notifying management that she would be flying among regular passengers. She wanted to experience the airline as an ordinary traveler. If all went well, she would keep a low profile. If something felt off, she planned to gather evidence and nudge the board toward improvements. Walking into Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport always stirred memories. As a child, she had visited once with her late father, a dedicated postal worker who had saved for years just to show her the heart of travel. Back then, she had gazed at the planes through thick glass windows, pressing her small hands against the cold surface, dreaming of the moment she would step on board as a passenger. Now she practically lived in airports. Life had changed drastically, and Ebony was proud of how far she had come. She approached the Millennium Airways counter with confidence, ticket in hand. A heavy carry-on bag trailed behind her, stuffed with a laptop, important documents, and a few personal items. She was wearing a polished but understated navy blue pantsuit, accented with a gold watch that glinted under the overhead lights. A young woman behind the desk. Her name tag read. Monica didn't look up for several seconds as Ebony approached. Instead, Monica was hunched over her phone, typing furiously. Ebony cleared her throat gently. "Excuse me," Ebony said with a polite smile. "I'm here to check in." Monica sighed, glanced at Ebony, and offered a curt nod. Her eyes roamed over Ebony's figure with a mixture of boredom and mild annoyance. Then she returned her gaze to her phone screen for an agonizing moment before depositing it out of sight. "Name Monica?" asked, tapping her computer keyboard. "Ebony Carter." Monica typed, scanned the screen, and frowned. She said nothing for a moment. Ebony felt the tension knot in her stomach. It wasn't the first time she'd been on the receiving end of a dismissive look at a check-in counter, especially once staff realized she was traveling in first class. Ebony had chosen to pay out of pocket for her seat today, rather than using the automatic upgrade her status and shares afforded her. She wanted to see if Millennium's frontline staff were as helpful as the brand boasted. "Flying first class to LaGuardia?" Monica asked. It wasn't a question so much as a statement laced with disbelief. Ebony nodded. That's correct. Here's my ID. She handed over her driver's license, reminding herself to stay calm. She was here to observe and learn, good or bad. Monica took the license, studied it, then studied Ebony's face. Uh-huh. Could you place your bag on the scale, checking any luggage? That's my only piece, Ebony said, pointing to a larger suitcase near her feet. Monica heaved an exaggerated sigh and motioned vaguely for Ebony to lift her bag onto the scale. Ebony wrestled it up, noticing Monica made no move to help, despite the fact that Ebony's bag was heavier than it looked. Ebony felt the first prick of annoyance, but she kept her composure. Monica stapled the luggage tag on, then slid a boarding pass across the counter. Gate B27. Boarding starts at 8:40 a.m. Next, Ebony waited, swallowing her agitation. May I request some assistance with my carry-on bag? It's quite heavy, and I have some back issues. Monica offered a hollow smile. There's a trolley if you need one. We don't usually help passengers with carry-ons unless like they're disabled or something. I see, Ebony murmured. She wasn't about to feign disability, but the cold refusal stung. She'd observed staff in other airlines politely offering older or obviously struggling passengers a hand. She gave a curt nod and collected her boarding pass. Thank you. She wheeled her carry-on away, heart pounding. A little courtesy went a long way, but apparently it was in short supply at this desk. She thought about revealing that she was a major investor. Yet Ebony reminded herself that the point of this trip was to observe incognito. If the staff behaved dismissively to her, they were likely doing it to others too. And that was a serious concern. Ebony made her way through the security line, which was already snaking around metal barriers. She had TSA pre-check, a status that could expedite the screening process. But the line today was moving slower than usual. She noticed one reason why a single TSA agent was diligently checking IDs, while next to him another agent seemed more engaged in conversation with a co-worker than directing passengers. Yet Ebony tried to maintain her positive mindset. She had faced hardships far greater than a minor airport hassle. Growing up as a black girl in a predominantly white school district had prepared her for subtle slights. She had channeled those experiences into a fierce determination, shaping herself into a formidable entrepreneur. But as the line crept forward and Ebony approached the TSA agent, her spidey senses tingled again. The agent waved her forward with a bored flick of the wrist, then scrutinized her ID for what felt like a full minute, far longer than any agent had ever taken with her in pre-check. He peered at Ebony's face, then back at the ID. You changed your hair, he asked. She blinked. Not recently. I'm wearing it in a twist-out style. It's the same hair as my photo, just styled differently. He cocked an eyebrow. Uh-huh. Then with a shrug, he handed her ID back. Go on, he said gruffly, motioning her into the body scanner line. Ebony exhaled, reminding herself not to let this dampen her day. If these were the small annoyances the average black female traveler faced regularly, Ebony was determined to address them from the vantage point of an airline investor who demanded respect for all passengers. She retrieved her shoes bag and laptop from the trays on the other side of the scanner. Shoulders tense. Pushing her carry-on toward the terminal, Ebony glanced at her phone. The flight was on schedule, so she had some time before boarding. She decided to head to a lounge. Technically, her first-class ticket provided access to Millennium Airways' exclusive Millennium Club. But Ebony remembered the last time she had tried to enter one of these lounges, the attendant had questioned whether she was truly eligible. I'm not letting any prejudice get in my way. she whispered to herself. Lounge access was part of the airline's promise to premium travelers, so Ebony steeled her nerves and went to find the lounge near Terminal B. The bright signage for Millennium Club greeted her with a shining metal emblem. Several travelers lined up at the desk. Ebony took her place in line, noticing a large LCD screen showcasing vacation hotspots in the Caribbean. Behind the lounge reception counter stood a middle-aged man with meticulously combed hair. His uniform was crisp, but his eyes scanned the line with a certain impatience. His name tag read Keith. One by one, passengers in front presented their credentials, and Keith waved them through with mechanical efficiency. When it was Ebony's turn, she placed her boarding pass and ID on the counter. Keith's eyes flicked to Ebony, and a shadow of hesitation appeared. He scanned the boarding pass, then stared at the screen. "You're Ebony Carter," he said. "Yes, that's correct," Ebony replied, voice steady. He cleared his throat. I don't see any special notation here about lounge access. First-class passengers on domestic flights are granted lounge access, correct?" Ebony asked politely. "I'm on a first-class ticket to New York, leaving in—" She glanced at her watch. "About an hour and a half." He shrugged. "Yes, usually that's the policy, but I see." "Huh. No mention in your reservation. Maybe you booked through a third party." Ebony frowned. "That shouldn't matter. I booked directly through the airline website. Also, I'm a—" She bit back the words. "Major investor deciding to test his knowledge of standard procedures. Loyal traveler with Millennium. Is there a specific reason I wouldn't qualify?" Keith rolled his eyes as if Ebony's presence was a bother. "We've had issues with travelers thinking they get lounge access when they don't. If you're not part of the membership program, or flying internationally, or if your status is insufficient, you can't get in." Ebony felt a flush crawl up her neck. "But your own website states that a domestic first-class ticket grants complimentary lounge access on the day of travel. Perhaps you could check with the supervisor." Keith's jaw tightened. The line behind Ebony was growing, and impatient travelers began shifting their weight from foot to foot. "Let me see." He picked up a phone behind the counter and dialed. Ebony heard him muttering to someone. When he hung up, he looked at Ebony grimly. "They said to let you in this time, but you need to be aware it's for international flights only, or membership holders. So you got lucky. Next time, do your research." He handed Ebony's boarding pass back with an air of finality. Ebony simply blinked, stunned by his condescending tone. She knew the policy inside out. She could have brandished an official memo from her personal correspondence with a board member, or directed Keith to the official rules. Instead, she made a mental note to document this incident. She gave him a tight smile. "Thank you," she said, stepping into the lounge. She was greeted by plush chairs, a curved bar with glimmering bottles, and a panoramic view of the runways. However, Ebony's appetite for luxury was sour. Something was wrong at Millennium Airways. Customer service training clearly wasn't translating to consistent politeness. She settled into a corner seat, took out her notebook, and jotted down a few bullet points. Staff dismissive and unhelpful at check-in. TSA issues might be beyond airline control, but overall attitude matters. The lounge attendant, ignorant of basic policy or borderline discriminatory. Potential for deeper systemic issues. Investigate. Her pen flew across the page, fueled by lingering disappointment. She sipped water, checked a few work emails, and mentally prepared for the upcoming board discussion in New York. She also considered whether she should confront the board with these personal experiences or keep it purely professional. Ebony wasn't one to demand special privileges. She wanted the airline to treat every passenger with respect, regardless of background or status. Time was ticking, and Ebony left the lounge with 10 minutes to spare before boarding. She arrived at gate B27 to find a small crowd. A uniformed gate agent, a young man with slicked-back hair, was busy on the phone. Another agent, a woman with dyed platinum blonde hair, typed furiously at a computer terminal. A digital sign overhead read, "Flight 524 to LGA. On time. Boarding soon." Ebony noticed an older black woman struggling with a large roller bag near the gate area. The woman looked around, apparently seeking assistance. Seeing no gate agents free, Ebony stepped forward. "Can I help you?" Ebony offered, gently touching the woman's shoulder. The older woman sighed, grateful. "Thank you, dear. I have to place this in the overhead bin once we board, but it's too heavy for me. I'm afraid to ask the staff. They look so busy and stressed." Ebony gave a reassuring smile. "Of course, I can help you board and lift it, or we can get a wheelchair assistant to help if you need it." She didn't want to impose, but the older woman nodded. "That'd be wonderful. My name is Linda, by the way." "I'm Ebony." She stuck out her hand, and they shared a quick handshake. Just then the gate agent on the phone slammed down the receiver. His name tag read Riley. He called into the microphone. "We'll begin pre-boarding for passengers needing extra time, military members and families with small children. Please have your boarding pass ready." Linda exhaled relief. "Thank you again for helping me." "Of course," Ebony said. "We'll go up together." But when they reached the gate podium, Ebony's heart sank a little. Riley gave them both a once-over. He turned to Linda. "Do you have a pre-board pass? Are you in a wheelchair, or do you need special assistance from the airline?" Linda hesitated. I don't have a pass, but Riley cut her off, raising a hand. "Ma'am, only those with official documentation of need can board at this time. Also, you can't just bring anyone else in line with you." Ebony stepped forward calmly. "We saw the announcement for passengers who need extra time. She's an older passenger with a heavy bag. I volunteered to help her." Linda nodded. "I'm 72, and I have a bit of arthritis." Riley pressed his lips together. "I'm sorry, but you'll have to board with your group. This is for official pre-boarding." He pointedly looked at Ebony's carry-on. "Unless you also have a condition." Ebony's blood simmered. She had never seen such a rigid interpretation of pre-boarding guidelines. Many airlines simply used common sense and compassion. Ebony tried to keep her tone even. "Is there any reason we can't help her get on the plane early? It won't cause any delay. We just want to do it efficiently and safely." Riley's eyes narrowed. "If we do it for you, we have to do it for everyone who claims to need help. We have procedures." Ebony and Linda exchanged glances. Linda's shoulders slumped. "It's fine, dear," she whispered to Ebony. "I'll wait." Ebony inhaled slowly. "Are you certain?" she murmured to Linda. "I'm sure your seat's near the front." Linda gave a resigned nod. "I'll be fine. Thank you, though." Ebony wanted to argue, but Linda's gentle eyes pleaded with her not to make a scene. So Ebony stepped aside, letting the people in wheelchairs file down the jet bridge. Still, Ebony felt an ache in her chest. She'd personally witnessed flight attendants in other airlines helping older passengers. She hoped the cabin crew would be more understanding than the ground staff. When first-class boarding was called, Ebony presented her boarding pass. Riley scanned it without looking at her. She stepped onto the plane with the swirl of stale air and smelled fresh coffee from the galley. Her seat was 1A, a plush window seat near the front. She made a point of turning around to watch for Linda, who boarded a few minutes later, searching for overhead bin space. Ebony caught her eye and gestured for her to come forward. Ebony quickly stood, stepping into the aisle to help Linda stow her bag overhead. A flight attendant swooped in. "Excuse me, ma'am. You're in first class, correct?" She glanced at Ebony, then at Linda. "Yes," Ebony said. "I'm just helping her with her bag." The attendant frowned as though Ebony had done something out of protocol. "Please take your seat, so other passengers can pass." She paused, noticing Ebony was in 1A. "I guess it's fine, but hurry." Linda gave Ebony a grateful smile. Ebony smiled back, lifting Linda's bag into the bin. With that done, Ebony returned to her seat. She stared out the plane window at the bustling tarmac. But her mind churned. Where was the empathy and courtesy that she'd heard Millennium prided itself on? Ebony recalled marketing slogans about inclusivity, about how Millennium strived to treat all passengers like family. If her experience was any indication, those slogans were hollow words. She closed her eyes, exhaling a silent prayer that the flight would pass without further ugliness. As the plane taxied away from the gate, the gentle hum of the engines vibrated beneath Ebony's feet, matching the thrum of adrenaline in her chest. She stared out the window at the wet runway, glistening in the early light, Atlanta slowly disappearing behind her. A part of her had hoped the flight would offer some reprieve, some quiet space to process the string of indignities she'd endured from Millennium Airways staff. But even as the aircraft lifted off, slicing upward into the clouds, she couldn't shake the tension coiled in her shoulders. Ebony reached for her phone one last time before switching to airplane mode. A red dot on her email app drew her attention. The subject line made her still. From Howard Green, CFO of Millennium Airways. Subject investment updates, urgent. She tapped it open, scanning quickly. Her eyes widened. The message was short, but its implications were massive. Vincent Coldwell, the airline's founder and the largest shareholder, was stepping away from day-to-day operations due to mounting health concerns. The board would be entering a period of transition, and given Ebony's position as the second-largest shareholder, her presence and insight were being urgently requested in upcoming strategy sessions. Ebony read the message twice, absorbing its weight. So this was why the tone of the last few investor calls had been so strained. Vincent had built the airline, nurtured it from the ground up. If he was truly stepping aside, a power vacuum was forming, and Ebony, previously content to operate in the shadows, now stood near its center. She lowered the phone and stared ahead, her mind buzzing. She hadn't planned to step into a public role, but after the treatment she'd experienced this morning, from the dismissive check-in agent to the lounge gatekeeping and the cold indifference at the boarding gate, it was clear Millennium needed new leadership. Not just in title, but in tone, values, and culture. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "Good afternoon, Ms. Carter," said a flight attendant, her name tag reading Donna. She held out a small menu card. "We have chicken or pasta. What would you prefer for your meal?" Ebony glanced up at her. Donna's smile was practiced, her voice just warm enough to meet the minimum standard of civility. But there was no genuine warmth. Still, Ebony offered a polite nod. "Chicken, please. And a sparkling water." Donna made a quick note and moved to the next seat without further word. Ebony watched her go, then glanced over her shoulder. A few rows behind her sat Linda, the elderly woman she had tried to help board the plane. Linda looked small and out of place, clutching her handbag and watching the flight crew with visible nervousness. Something gnawed at Ebony. She pressed the call button. Donna returned after a moment. "Yes?" she asked curtly. "There's a woman 2 rows behind. Her name's Linda. She seemed a little uneasy earlier. Would you mind checking in on her?" Donna followed Ebony's gaze and gave a lukewarm nod. "We'll get to her during service." Ebony kept her expression neutral, but the casual dismissal stirred something deep inside her. It was a pattern she knew all too well, bare minimum care given to those who didn't look the part. She turned her face back toward the window, trying to push down her irritation. After the meal was served a bland tray with under-seasoned chicken and lukewarm vegetables, Ebony decided to stretch her legs. She walked softly toward the galley, hoping to clear her head. The curtain was half drawn, and she paused just outside, hesitating. That's when she heard them. 2 voices, low but unmistakably familiar. "I can't believe they let her in." "First," said one, a male voice laced with sarcasm. Ebony froze. "That's Riley." She realized the same gate agent who'd refused to let Linda pre-board and had barely made eye contact with Ebony herself. "She probably used some corporate freebie," Riley continued. "You saw her struggling with that bag, acting like she owns the place." Donna chuckled. "And that old woman she'd dragged along could barely hold herself upright." "I swear if one more person tries to play the sympathy card." "I know, right?" Riley said. "They all want first-class treatment without doing anything to deserve it. It's exhausting." Donna snorted again. "I'm so over this job some days. People act like we're their servants." Ebony's throat tightened. Her chest ached not from hurt, but from rage. She stepped back silently, careful not to make a sound. She returned to her seat with measured strides, though her pulse thundered in her ears. She had been disrespected, dismissed, and now mocked alongside Linda for nothing more than existing. She thought of all the passengers like her and Linda who had flown with Millennium, hoping for dignity and receiving disdain instead. How many had left feeling unseen, unwelcome? How many hadn't had her power or resources to speak out? She retrieved her phone and opened the Notes app. With steady hands, she documented every word, every inflection, every name. Not out of vengeance, but necessity. This wasn't just a rude moment, it was a symptom. A cultural rot that had infected the very people meant to uphold the Airline'S image. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard. A thought crystallized. If they treat shareholders like this, how do they treat everyone else? She sat with that thought, letting it settle. For years, Ebony had quietly invested, hoping her influence behind the scenes would help Millennium grow into the inclusive, forward-thinking brand it promised to be. But promises didn't matter without accountability. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out her leather-bound notebook. Flipping to a fresh page, she began drafting a plan, not just for complaint, but for change. A training initiative, a performance audit, a restructuring of feedback loops. Her mind raced with solutions, systems, ways to rebuild trust. One human interaction at a time. For the remainder of the flight, she said little. She kept her composure, smiled politely, and thanked Donna when she collected the tray. But inside, Ebony had crossed a threshold. The woman who had once come to observe was now preparing to lead. And when the wheels touched down in New York, it would not be as just another passenger. It would be as the quiet storm that Millennium Airways never saw coming. The plane landed at LaGuardia Airport on schedule. Ebony helped Linda retrieve her bag, exchanging a quick hug before they parted ways at baggage claim. Linda thanked Ebony profusely, and Ebony promised to keep in touch, giving Linda her email. Ebony's next stop was a meeting with two board members, Alicia Martin and Jerome Kim, at Millennium Airways' New York branch office. They'd arranged to meet in a conference room near the airport to discuss expansions and upcoming marketing strategies. Ebony took a ride-share to the office building, still wearing her professional attire from the morning. She was greeted by a sleek lobby with frosted glass doors bearing Millennium's emblem. Ebony recognized Alicia's voice before she even saw her. Alicia Martin was a dynamic executive known for her progressive strategies. She was on a phone call, pacing the marble floor in heels that clicked with each stride. Alicia spotted Ebony, ended her call swiftly, and greeted her with a warm embrace. Ebony. Thank heavens you made it on time. How was your flight? Ebony forced a smile. It was educational. Alicia's eyebrows rose. Uh-oh. I don't like the sound of that. Let's head upstairs. Jerome is waiting. They took an elevator to the 7th floor, where a spacious conference room awaited, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac in the distance. Jerome Kim, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, stood to shake Ebony's hand. Ebony, great to see you. Heard you had some interesting experiences with the staff. Alicia mentioned you flew incognito. He gave a half smile. She nodded. Yes, and I have quite a bit to share. They settled around a sleek glass table. Alicia offered Ebony a glass of water, which she accepted. Then Ebony launched into a detailed account of everything she had witnessed, from check-in to lounge access to gate agents and flight attendants. She didn't hold back, describing the tension, the rude comments, the lack of empathy. As she spoke, Jerome scribbled notes. Alicia's expression grew grim, and Ebony felt her cheeks flush with indignation as she recalled the overheard conversation. That's not our brand, Alicia said firmly, eyes flicking to Jerome. We're supposed to be inclusive, progressive, a new kind of airline. I can't believe this is happening on our watch. Ebony nodded. I'll spare you the disclaimers about typical corporate marketing, but your staff is severely lacking the courtesy training promised. They're humiliating travelers, especially older folks and people of color. Jerome tapped his pen. I won't deny that we've had complaints, Ebony. We're trying to address them, but we had no idea it was this blatant. By the way, have you read the CFO's email? Vincent's stepping aside. I saw it, Ebony replied. And that's why I'm glad we're meeting. Because if Vincent steps aside, I'm the second largest shareholder. I may have to become more actively involved in leadership decisions. If that's the case, I want to be sure the airline truly aligns with my values. Alicia and Jerome exchanged a look of relief, as though Ebony's willingness to intervene was exactly what they needed. Alicia leaned forward. If you're open to it, Ebony, we'd like you to come to the office tomorrow. The CEO, Richard Givens, will be in from Chicago. We want you to share your experiences with him directly. I know he's worried about staff retention and brand perception. Hearing from a top investor might know will make a difference. Ebony pressed her lips together. I'm willing. But I also have a proposition. I don't want to just complain. I want to help fix the problem. Perhaps we can develop a new training module for staff. We can emphasize empathy, inclusivity, and personal accountability. I'm even willing to fund a pilot program for it, if the board will approve it. Jerome nodded eagerly. That's exactly the kind of synergy we need, Ebony. Let's do it. Let's gather the details tomorrow when we have the right people in the room. They hashed out a quick schedule for the following day. Ebony left feeling a glimmer of hope. She had dreaded the possibility that the airline's senior leadership might be apathetic or dismissive. Instead, Alicia and Jerome seemed genuinely concerned. Maybe Millennium Airways wasn't a lost cause. Ebony awoke early the next morning in her New York hotel suite, a sense of anticipation buzzing through her veins. The day ahead might alter her role in the airline dramatically. She dressed in a stylish cream-colored blazer, with matching slacks pairing it with low-heeled pumps. She wanted to project confidence, but remain approachable. An hour later, she arrived at the Millennium Airways corporate office in Manhattan. Alicia met her in the lobby, wearing a burgundy dress, her expression a mixture of nerves and excitement. Together they stepped into a large boardroom with panoramic windows showcasing the city skyline. A group of executives milled about, sipping coffee, exchanging small talk. Ebony spotted Richard Givens, immediately a tall, broad-shouldered man, with a surprisingly youthful face for someone rumored to be in his mid-50s. He exuded an aura of quiet authority. Next to him stood Howard Green, the CFO, who had emailed Ebony. Alicia guided Ebony over to them. "Richard Howard, meet Ebony Carter," Alicia said. "Ebony, these are two of the men at the helm of Millennium Airways." Richard offered a firm handshake. "Pleasure to meet you in person, Miss Carter. I've heard quite a lot about you." He gave a warm smile, but Ebony sensed a flicker of curiosity behind his eyes. Howard followed with a polite nod. "Thanks for coming up on such short notice." Before Ebony could respond, Alicia gestured everyone toward the long boardroom table. Once everyone was seated, Richard cleared his throat. "Welcome, everyone. We're here primarily to discuss the transition of leadership after Vincent's retirement. But we also have a pressing issue regarding customer service. Ms. Carter, I understand you have some first-hand experiences you'd like to share." Ebony recounted her story for the room, from check-in to the lounge fiasco, to the overheard conversation on the plane. She chose her words carefully but didn't sugarcoat anything. As she spoke, she saw a range of reactions. Some looked appalled, others perplexed, and at least one older executive pursed his lips as though Ebony were describing an anomaly that couldn't possibly be widespread. When she finished, Richard rubbed his chin. "That's disturbing to say the least. Thank you for conducting this incognito check, Ebony. As one of our top investors, your perspective is invaluable." He paused, glancing around the table. "Obviously, we need a thorough investigation. And for the staff you encountered, I want their supervisors notified. We can't tolerate such behavior." Howard nodded. "Agreed. We have standard training, but I suspect it's not being enforced consistently. Plus, our rapid expansion might have diluted the corporate culture." Ebony leaned forward. "I want to help fix this. I propose a new training initiative focusing on empathy, respect, and going the extra mile. We'd make it a requirement for all staff, frontline, corporate, everyone. Let's call it Project Heart, referencing the heart of our airline's promise." A murmur spread around the table, some nodding in approval. One executive asked, "We have budget constraints, Ebony. Do you have a plan for funding?" Ebony took a breath. "I'm prepared to invest an additional sum, specifically earmarked for staff development. But I want full transparency on implementation. And I want staff from every department involved, including top-tier executives, so there's no sense of this being just another corporate P-move." Richard's eyebrows lifted. "You're serious? You're willing to invest more capital to drive this program?" "I am," Ebony said firmly. "I believe in Millennium's mission, but I won't stand by and watch it fail the very customers it claims to champion." Howard gave a small smile. "That's admirable." Richard looked around the room. "Any objections to Miss Carter spearheading Project Heart?" No one spoke against it. "Then it's settled. Let's get the details ironed out in the next week. Ebony, I'll assign you a team of our best training and HR professionals." Ebony exhaled relief and determination mingling. This was a step forward. She glanced at Alicia, who offered a supportive nod, and at Jerome, who scribbled notes with renewed vigor. As the discussion continued, Ebony felt a sense of validation. She had come so far, both personally and professionally, and now she was in a position to challenge systemic bias within an entire corporation. The magnitude wasn't lost on her. Later that afternoon, Ebony was given a private office to begin drafting her ideas. Alicia arranged for the gate agent and flight attendant from Ebony's flight, Riley and Donna, to be summoned for interviews with their superiors. Ebony, from behind the scenes, had requested that these staff members not be outright fired until proper investigations were done. She wanted real accountability, not just scapegoating. That evening, Ebony received a phone call from Alicia, who sounded agitated. "Ebony, you'll never guess. We did a quick audit of passenger complaints from the past 3 months at Hartsfield-Jackson. That gate agent Riley has been cited multiple times. The lounge attendant, Keith, also has a file of negative feedback. It's not an isolated incident." Ebony closed her laptop, sighing. "So there is a pattern." "Yes. Management is recommending immediate termination, but I told them we need to hear from you. After all, you've begun this new approach to staff development." Ebony's emotions warred. Part of her felt these employees deserved to be fired for humiliating passengers. Another part felt she owed them at least a chance for rehabilitation if they could show genuine remorse and change. She thought of how many times she'd faced adversity and grown from it. Could they do the same? Let's place them on unpaid suspension for now. Then if they want to keep their jobs, they must complete the new empathy training and pass an evaluation, Ebony said. Alicia hesitated. That's certainly more lenient than I expected. But I respect your decision. Ebony hung up, feeling drained, yet resolute. She believed in second chances, but only if people truly wanted to change. 2 days later, Ebony sat in the same conference room in Manhattan. A swirl of rumors had circulated about the big investor who flew undercover and exposed staff failings. Some employees were worried, some were in denial, and a few were defiant. To Ebony's surprise, one of the biggest skeptics turned out to be an executive named Martin Rizzo, who oversaw certain ground operations. He claimed Ebony's experiences were anomalies. In an internal memo, he wrote that Ebony's story was blown out of proportion, implying that Ebony might be overly sensitive due to personal biases. When Ebony read the memo, her blood ran cold. She marched into the boardroom with it clutched in her hand. Richard and Howard were already there with Alicia reading over some documents. "Have you seen this, Ebony?" demanded, slapping the printout on the table. Alicia skimmed it, eyes widening. "Oh my God." Howard read it, face paling. "I didn't realize Rizzo's stance was so brazen." Richard's jaw tightened. "I'll speak to him immediately. This is unacceptable." Ebony took a deep breath. "We can't let ignorance from someone that high up sabotage our efforts. I want to speak to Martin Rizzo in person with all of you present." Richard glanced at the clock. "He should be here soon for the daily operations briefing. Let's handle this then." Half an hour later, Martin Rizzo strode into the room with an air of confidence. He was short, stocky, wearing a tailored grey suit. He gave Ebony a cursory nod, then addressed Richard. "You asked for me?" Richard pointed to the memo. "Explain yourself." Martin shrugged dismissively. "I meant every word. I've run ground operations for decades. We have standard procedures. If Ms. Carter had a negative experience, it's unfortunate but hardly indicative of systemic issues. Our staff is well trained. Sometimes passengers take things personally." not our fault. Ebony stared at him carefully, reining in her frustration. You call the behavior I encountered standard procedures. Rude staff, condescending attitudes, overheard, mocking. Are you telling me that's normal? He smirked. I'm not saying I condone rudeness. I'm saying that people can interpret certain interactions as rude when they're just standard operating instructions. For instance, verifying lounge eligibility is normal. Some folks don't like being questioned, so they cry discrimination. Alicia bristled. This is bigger than Ebony's personal feelings. We have a record of multiple complaints about the same employees Ebony dealt with. Martin crossed his arms, leaning back in the chair. Complaints happen at every airline. You think we can keep everyone happy? This is business. We move thousands of people daily. Some are bound to feel slighted. Ebony felt her temper rising. I'm not naive, Mr. Rizzo. I'm also not new to business. We have evidence that employees are disrespecting passengers. We have negative reviews piling up. We can't afford to dismiss them as mere whiners. He waved a hand as if swatting a fly. So what if a gate agent made a flippant remark? Big deal. Passengers can be demanding. The staff gets tired. Ebony stood palms on the table, leaning toward him. We are in the service industry, Mr. Rizzo. Our employees represent the brand. If they're mocking or discriminating against passengers, that's a huge problem, ethically and financially. Martin rolled his eyes. Oh, I see. The moral crusade. Listen, Ms. Carter. I know you have a big stake in the company. Ebony's eyes narrowed. I'm the second largest shareholder, and soon I might take on a leadership role if Vincent Coldwell fully steps down. Are you suggesting my perspective is irrelevant? A hush fell. Martin opened his mouth, then closed it. Finally, he muttered, I just think you're blowing it out of proportion. Richard slammed a palm on the table. Rattling water glasses. Enough, Martin. Your outdated attitude won't fly here. Pardon the pun. Our brand identity is on the line. Ebony's assessment is not a personal vendetta. It's a legitimate crisis. We're losing loyal customers. Howard's tone softened, but he addressed Martin gravely. We appreciate your decades of experience, but times have changed. Airlines face fierce competition. Passengers have options, and they won't keep choosing us if we don't handle them properly. Martin glared at Ebony, though his bravado deflated. Fine. If the board wants to coddle customers, go ahead. Just don't expect me to do cartwheels when someone complains about overhead bin space. Ebony felt a surge of anger and pity. She recognized a dinosaur in an evolving industry. Mr. Rizzo, you're welcome to partake in the new training program. If you refuse, you might find yourself at odds with the entire direction of this airline. He scoffed, stood, and straightened his tie. Then maybe I'll think about early retirement. With that, he stormed out. Silence. Alicia broke it with a wry smile. That was intense. Are you okay? Ebony. Ebony sank into her chair. I'm fine. But we have our work cut out for us. Richard nodded. We do. But you have my full support. If Martin wants to leave, we'll fill his position with someone who aligns with our future. Alicia gave Ebony a gentle pat on the shoulder. You did well. Don't let that dinosaur get to you. Ebony forced a smile. He's a symptom of a bigger problem. But I'm ready. Word traveled fast. In just a matter of days, news of Ebony Carter's undercover experience with Millennium Airways spread through the company like wildfire. What had begun as a quiet observation mission by a silent investor had now turned into a corporate reckoning. The story began to circulate internally. A top shareholder had posed as an everyday first-class passenger and uncovered a pattern of rudeness, inconsistency, and quiet prejudice. Most staff didn't know Ebony's name before, but now it was whispered with a mixture of respect and apprehension. At the executive level, meetings intensified. Department heads were summoned. Reports were pulled. Hundreds of passenger complaints were reviewed with fresh scrutiny, ones that had been previously buried under claims of passenger error or staff fatigue. And while the boardroom discussed policy, social media lit up with a completely different kind of storm. Unbeknownst to anyone at Millennium, the elderly woman Ebony had assisted at the airport, Linda, was far more than she appeared. A few days after their flight, Ebony sat in her Manhattan hotel room, reviewing training outlines for Project Heart, when a message pinged on her phone. It was from Alicia, with a subject line that read, "You're going viral." Ebony blinked. She clicked the link Alicia had attached, and her screen filled with a blog post titled, "Helped by a kind stranger, ignored by airline staff." The blog was published under the pseudonym Wonderwise Woman, a name Ebony vaguely recognized from travel columns. Linda, it turned out, was a respected travel writer who had built a sizable following of older, mostly female readers. Her tone was warm, observant, and fiercely honest. In the post, Linda described her humiliating treatment at the gate, the struggle to carry her bag, the dismissive attitude of staff. But most importantly, she described Ebony. She didn't use Ebony's full name at first. She simply referred to her as the kind young woman in first class who stood up when others turned away. But the post didn't stop there. It went on to reveal that Linda had since learned her helper wasn't just a good Samaritan. She was a major investor in the airline itself. The revelation stunned Linda's readers. The blog exploded. Comments poured in thousands within hours. People shared their own stories of rude treatment while flying. Others expressed admiration for Ebony's humility and action. The post was soon picked up by mainstream media with headlines like, "Airline Investor Goes Undercover, Exposes Discrimination," "A CEO in Disguise," "Ebony Carter and the Truth About Flying," while Black Ebony watched it all unfold with a mix of shock and disbelief. She had expected her report to rattle the executive floor, not the internet. But once it began, it couldn't be stopped. Travel influencers reposted the story. Consumer advocacy groups demanded answers. The hashtag #FlyWithHeart, borrowed from Ebony's initiative, began trending nationwide. And while the PR team at Millennium scrambled to issue statements, Ebony did something far more powerful. She remained silent. Let the story speak for itself. Instead, she focused on implementation. Project Heart wasn't just a slogan. It was becoming a blueprint for reform. The initiative would include mandatory empathy training for all frontline and corporate staff, anonymous feedback kiosks installed in lounges and terminals, leadership accountability metrics tied to real passenger satisfaction, a mentorship pipeline to promote staff members who embodied the values of service and respect. It was ambitious, but Ebony wasn't aiming small. Meanwhile, the two employees most directly involved in Ebony's flight, Riley the gate agent and Keith the lounge attendant, were formally suspended without pay. Their HR files were filled with past complaints that had never been escalated. For years, they had coasted on a system that protected underperformance and dismissed passenger voices. To Ebony's surprise, both men emailed her. Their messages were short but heartfelt. They apologized for their behavior, admitted they hadn't understood how their words could cut so deeply, and expressed a willingness to learn. Ebony wasn't naive. She knew some of it was likely self-preservation, but she also knew people could change. She had. Why not them? She forwarded their messages to HR with a single note. Suspend, then train. If they fail the final evaluation, terminate. Her policy was simple accountability, with a path to redemption. But not everyone took the news with such humility. Martin Rizzo, the operations executive who had tried to downplay Ebony's concerns, quietly announced his early retirement. The internal memo framed it as a personal decision, but insiders knew the truth. He was being pushed out by a board that no longer had patience for arrogance, masquerading as experience. Ebony didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. Instead, she took the moment to reinforce the point. This company is growing, and growth means evolution. If you can't evolve, you step aside. At the next board meeting, Richard Givens formally offered her the role of vice chair of the board. The vote was unanimous. Ebony Richard said as he handed her the proposal, "You've changed more in 1 week than we've managed in a year. We need your voice and your vision at the top." She accepted not out of ego, but out of duty. Millennium had the potential to be great, not just profitable, but principled, and for the first time she could shape it from within. In the days that followed, Ebony received emails from employees she'd never met. Flight attendants, mechanics, call center agents. Some were skeptical, others were hopeful, but many thanked her. They too had grown tired of watching passengers be treated like burdens instead of people. Linda's blog post continued to circulate, now cited in travel magazines and discussed on morning news programs. And in a second follow-up post, Linda wrote, "I met a stranger who reminded me what dignity looks like. Then I discovered she was leading the change we all need. That's not just kindness that's legacy." Ebony read it from her hotel room window, the city lights twinkling below her heart full. Legacy. That word lingered in her chest. She hadn't set out to become a symbol. She simply wanted a fair flight. But now the journey had become so much more. And karma, it had arrived not with vengeance, but with vision. Several months later, Ebony stood at a podium in Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International Airport, addressing a small crowd. By her side was Alicia, and behind them stood a newly designed kiosk with the words Project Heart emblazoned on a digital screen. The kiosk would serve as a real-time passenger feedback station, part of Ebony's initiative to ensure the airline stayed accountable. Camera flashes lit the space. Local news outlets had come to cover the launch ceremony, and Ebony felt a twinge of nervous energy. She wore a crisp white blouse, a teal skirt, and an airline-issue scarf she had borrowed for the occasion, symbolizing unity with the staff. "I'm proud to stand here, not just as an investor in Millennium Airways, but as a traveler who believes in the power of empathy." Ebony began, her voice carrying over the microphone. "We've come a long way in a short time, and we have a long journey ahead. Project Heart is our pledge to listen to improve and to ensure every passenger is treated with the dignity they deserve." A round of applause followed. Ebony stepped aside for Alicia, who spoke briefly about operational changes, new staff training modules, and how they had already seen a drop in complaints and an uptick in positive feedback. After the ceremony, Ebony mingled with staff members. Some recognized her from the viral blog post. A few approached to thank her for pushing the company toward better standards. She even spotted Riley and Keith in the crowd, looking sheepish but determined to show they had changed. They had completed their mandatory empathy training, and Ebony hoped the transformation was genuine. She caught Keith's eye, and he nodded respectfully, mouthing the words, "Thank you." It seemed like a heartfelt gesture. In the weeks that followed, Ebony juggled her new position as vice chair with her philanthropic efforts. She oversaw the rollout of better onboard amenities, flexible policies for assisting older passengers, and a new mentorship program for employees with leadership potential. Each day, Ebony reminded herself that this wasn't about her. It was about giving voice to passengers like Linda, who often went ignored or dismissed. Her final triumph came when Vincent Coldwell formally announced his retirement, naming Ebony as his chosen successor to lead the board. On the day of Vincent's farewell gathering, Ebony stood before the entire executive team, employees, and some invited media. Her acceptance speech was short but impactful, focusing on unity, respect, and the importance of accountability. In the end, Ebony reflected on how a single journey could spark massive change. From being refused help with a bag to unveiling the hidden flaws of an entire airline, she had seen the worst and best of corporate culture. And through it all, she discovered her calling not just to invest in profitable ventures, but to shape them into institutions that genuinely cared for people. And that's how Ebony Carter, once a girl with wide-eyed dreams at Hartsfield-Jackson, became the force that transformed Millennium Airways from a problematic carrier to a shining example of empathy in aviation. Thank you for watching or reading this dramatic journey of resilience, revelation, and redemption. Ebony Carter's story reminds us that no matter our background or status, we all deserve courtesy and respect, especially when we place our trust and money in airlines or any service provider. From that humiliating moment when Ebony struggled to find help for her heavy bag to her courageous decision to unveil the truth from within, we witnessed how a single experience can spark powerful change. In the end, Ebony's tireless efforts to champion kindness and inclusivity not only reshaped Millennium Airways, but also inspired an entire industry to re-evaluate its approach to customer service. If you found this story captivating, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more real-life inspired tales that remind us of the extraordinary power of empathy, perseverance, and a dash of courage. Safe travels.